Hi folks, you're very welcome to this session this evening, staying active on the biodiversity theme over the winter. So what I will do now is I'm just going to share my PowerPoint presentation with you, and just bear in mind that there will be slides. The slides will be made available to you at the end of the session. So if you want them to be sent to you, just let me know at the end and I can send them by chat here or by email afterwards. So please take notes by all means, but I would just say be selective. There's a lot of different ideas and suggestions as I go through this presentation, and really just to be selective, pick the ones that resonate with you or that are most appropriate to your school setting, and then maybe offer these as ideas or suggestions at your next committee meeting and or staff meeting. So just an assumption, I suppose, at the start of this session, we're at the end of January. So ideally, if you are in year 1 of your work, and certainly in year 2 of your work, you should have completed step 1 and step 2 before now. So step 1 is your Green Schools Committee should be established, and step 2 is your environmental review should be complete. So the environmental review for the Green Schools theme is, there's 2 criteria that need to be met for that. One is to do the awareness survey. That is a short 4-question survey in your handbook. There's a PDF file online to help you record that data. And then the other step for the within the environmental review is the habitat survey or the habitat map. And that's just establishing what is on your school grounds before you take any action as your starting point. So assuming that those 2 steps are done, if you haven't got those 2 steps done, don't panic, stay with us here today, get ideas inside in your mind, but as I say, go back and make sure that you've completed those steps before you carry on with any actions that we talk about or suggest here today. And I suppose importantly, step 2 really informs the best actions for your school. So it's really helpful to yourself if you can complete that first before you decide to take action. Okay, so we're looking at winter spring. That's our focus today. There's 3 main areas that I've decided to focus on today that are probably most appropriate. So the first one is planning your space, planning your school grounds area. The second is looking at what are the most seasonally appropriate actions that you can take outdoors right now. And then the third element is just investigating citizen science opportunities into the future over the next few months. So the first element that we look at today is planning your garden or planning the school grounds, identifying growing spaces and identifying areas that can be targeted for improving biodiversity, what areas, spaces, corners, edges can be used to enhance the grounds for biodiversity, and then identifying what, if any, changes you would like to make to those particular areas. So a key thing would be to delegate as well, and we look at that element as we go through. So identifying your growing spaces, that's identifying, your beds, your pots, your window boxes, your lawns, and edges and hedges. So these are the places that you can, plant up with pollinator-friendly plants that you can maybe put a wildflower meadow into, or you can grow trees around your edges and hedges, or you can let them grow wild, and which also is great for biodiversity. And then just identify what, if any, changes you would like to make. So to help you in that vein, I have put together a list of, I suppose, the campus features that we see being grown or introduced or created on most schools during the biodiversity theme. So this list it's not exhaustive, but also just to point out, most schools would not do most of them. Really, most schools would handpick a few of these and carry them out. So we're looking at planting trees, window boxes, bird feeders and bird tables, bird nest boxes, organic, vegetable or herb beds, bug hotels, piles of logs, rocks or leaves, native wildflower patch, unmanaged wildlife areas, compost heaps, bat boxes and ponds. So there's an awful lot there. And as I say, we would not expect schools to carry out all of these. It's more a case of picking and choosing which ones suit your environment, your community the best. So one way to approach this is to assign different landscape features to different class groups or student groups. But another way to look at it is actually to kind of go the other direction, decide what species the different class groups are going to be responsible for encouraging or taking care of, and then let them come up with the best plan of how to do that. And that's probably a better way to do it, in that it's more meeting the needs of the animals instead of just throwing random features in around the school grounds and just hoping that something comes of it. And same with the mammal groups. Now, this is by no means clear cut. It's really nice to have tables and charts and boxes and make it look neat, but really this is quite a messy interactive structure, because really, if we're looking at leaf piles, I link that to the mammal group just purely because a leaf pile can be a good opportunity for a hedgehog to find cover or hibernate. But with log and rock piles, what we find is amphibians do very well. If they're moist, you'll find newts and frogs in there in particular areas. So, by focusing in on particular mammal groups, though, you will very successfully be able to design the right environment for those animal groups, instead of just, as I say, putting up random features. Okay, so that same table that I've just shown you, this is a repeat. The left-hand column is the exact same. So it's looking at the trees, the boxes, the bird feeders, the bird nest boxes, etc. And what I've done here is I've given a link for each one to give you guidance on where to find information on how to do each of those well. And some of the links are repeated because, for example, in this garden wildlife booklet, it actually covers a lot of different features and how to install them. So they're all different links that are very helpful to, if you decide that each of these features is what you want to do, you'll be able to find more information there. We can't force the animal diversity in the garden. We have to attract it in and give it space and the means to thrive. And we can do this by increasing the plant diversity and the habitat structure diversity. And always allow areas to go a bit wild where possible, because that is, that's the real wilderness, and that's the real environment in which our animals will thrive. So then looking at winter-spring focus, the winter-spring, the second of our winter-spring focus areas, we look at seasonally appropriate actions. And what I'm breaking it down into plants and animals or wildlife. And if you are year one and not very experienced in the garden, do not panic. Hone in on maybe one or two of these plants and another one or two of the animals, and just go with that. But if you are somewhat experienced and or in your second year, some of these might be nice ideas to bolster the work that you've already done. And as I say, we do not expect schools to have everything on this list completed. So in terms of our plants, this is the time of year to get bare root trees into the ground. So the winter period, so once the leaves fall off the trees and before they come back on, that season is the best time of year to plant trees. Trees are, when they're young, and they're like little whips that as thick as a pencil, and you can buy them for relatively cheap at this time of year. They're called bare root because they don't come in pots. And if you expose the roots of a tree in the summer months when they have leaves on it, if you expose the roots to air and light, the tree will likely die. But at this time of year, when the trees are dormant and the sap is not rising, the trees will be fine with air on their roots for prolonged periods, hours at a time. So it's relatively cheap to get bare root. So if you were to call a nursery, a tree nursery, and find out what native trees they have, and if they have any bare root stock still in, they should do. There's still plenty of time before kind of middle of March to get your trees planted this year. If not, put it on the to-do list for next autumn. It's a good time of year to start working on your herbs. If you have a lot of herbs in the garden, if you have raised beds, if you have a sensory garden and nobody's really paying very much attention to it, why don't you go out and investigate and see? You can bring your class out and you can divide up the herbs if they've spread and grown excessively, and just splitting apart the roots, and you can pot up the small bits that you pull off into roots, and they will into separate pots, and they will grow up into new herbs. The same with the fruit bush hardwood cuttings. You can take cuttings of fruit bushes such as blackcurrant or gooseberry at this time of year and stick them into a pot of compost, and they will grow into new bushes. For any of these ideas, if you just Google them very quickly, There's loads of videos on gardening websites and that showing you very simply how to do these different tasks if you've never done them before. Similarly, if you have a raspberry cane stand on your school grounds, or at home if you want to bring new raspberries in, the original raspberry canes that you may have planted a few years ago, if you just put 2 in, no doubt over the years you'll have noticed that you've had more and more raspberry canes each year. That's because they send kind of roots or rhizomes underground and pop up new canes a little bit away from the original plant each year. So after a few years, you might feel like the raspberry stand is creeping and getting much bigger, which it is. And so what you can do at this time of year over the winter period, again, you can dig up those extra canes, and they're quite hardy. You can just cut through the roots and create small little root balls and pop them up into separate plant pots and gift them or plant them in other areas of the school grounds, or maybe have a plant sale, or to raise money for your biodiversity endeavors, to buy more seeds or something. But this is the time of year to be doing that work with the raspberry canes, and it's a nice little opportunity for a class maybe to get outside and to help out in the garden. Similarly, the strawberry runners. So I don't know if you've ever grown strawberries. The original plant, after it is flowered and fruited, will send out lots of runners, just new stalks that once they hit the ground, they'll send out little rootlets and a new plant will grow in that place. So it's similar to the raspberries over time, but a lot faster actually over time. The strawberry plants will have spread quite considerably out from where the original plants were. So just to keep on top of that it doesn't get too messy, you can take these new plants where they've planted themselves, snip off the connecting runners to other plants and take out the rootlets and pot them up into a separate plant. And again, you can find another better place in the school grounds to continue growing more strawberries, or you can gift them or send them home with students or whatever. So that's another opportunity, a job that can be carried out of doors at the moment in schools. The next item on the list is sourcing seeds. So if you didn't collect, say, for example, your sunflower seeds from your sunflowers last autumn, if you didn't collect them and dry them out and put them away to save them for this year, then it's time to go and maybe consider buying seeds. I'd say most people don't save their seeds in that way, but some of you may have. But anyway, in either way, it's time to start thinking about what you're going to grow this year. So just for anybody who's totally new to this, seeds are relatively cheap. You can get a packet of tens or hundreds for just for a couple of euro, depending on what crop you're looking to buy. And the final thing that you can be doing at this time of the year, of course, is clearing out the weeds, preparing your beds, making them ready and empty, and ready for whatever plans you have in terms of growing for the rest of the year. Then looking at the animal side of things, what can we do? We can provide shelter for roost, nest, and hibernation for birds in particular, and other animals too. But just be mindful that different species require different nest boxes, different size of nest boxes, and that each nest box should be orientated in the right direction. So all this information is readily available online, but I think often doesn't get looked up. So I've put together lots of links to guide you to the different appropriate information for all of these things. So yeah, just if you're putting up bird boxes, be very mindful about what species you're trying to attract there, and is the box going into the right kind of location, that it's quiet enough or it's facing the right direction, etc. Same with bat boxes. These will be used in April through to October, so best to get them up now. Same with the birds, actually, just to point that out, the timing of year is quite irrelevant. Birds will only and bats will only use these boxes if they've become familiar with them from the time they've started to site prospect or search for a site, which is happening any time from now. So really you want these boxes to be up in the next couple of weeks, so that as soon as these animals start to look for appropriate spaces, those boxes are there and available and they have time to suss them out. Otherwise, if you get them up a bit later in the year, they won't actually nest in them until following spring. So you still have an opportunity at this point to do that. My key message here would be to research it well, do one thing well, instead of throwing up all the random nest boxes that won't actually be used, or they may even cause fatalities. And then looking at food as well, just remember that the best food for birds is what nature provides. So think of hawthorn berries, thinking of growing your sunflowers for the seeds, thinking of wildflower seed heads and teasels and things like that, they're really vital. That diversity that nature provides throughout the year is really what keeps animals healthy and strong in our environment. But in the absence of those, by all means supplement. So we need to really think about the appropriate food and appropriate feeding. And again, I've provided the links which goes through some of that detail. And just to reiterate, if you can delegate some of this, some of these elements to different class groups, to different teachers to kind of investigate a bit more and just do it as correctly as possible. And as I say, keep your actions fewer, but do them really well so that what you're providing is really is the most appropriate food. So for example, peanuts left out loose on a bird feeding table in springtime can be a choking hazard to young in nest. Finding out a little bit more about what requirements there are for each different species, and then deciding which bird species you're actually going to try and feed and support, and using the appropriate feeders, and maintaining a cleanliness and cleaning routine. Again, I've included links here that you can find out more about that, but there are diseases that spread between birds far more readily when they're congregating en masse on a bird feeder, which we've provided. So it's important that if we are going to provide a bird feeder, that we do it as ethically as possible for the animals that are feeding there. So we've covered planning and then the seasonally appropriate actions. And finally, we're going to look at investigating citizen science opportunities. So citizen science is I suppose, structures that are provided to Joe Soap individuals like yourselves and myself that aren't engaging in scientific research on a daily basis, but who maybe have a slight interest in it and are willing to take a few recordings and submit them to people researchers that can then go and analyze that information. And I've heard of students through looking through stargazing, identifying new planets or stars or new things in the night sky that have never been discovered before because they were taking part in these kind of citizen science projects. With ourselves in the Environmental Education Unit of Antashka, we have a citizen science project called Globe, and that's linking in with schools across Europe, looking at air quality and other scientific elements. So all scientific research. But because we're looking at biodiversity, I suppose it's important that we try and find citizen science projects relating to biodiversity here in Ireland, and there are plenty. So I'm just going to highlight a few here. A few different monitoring schemes. Most of them are associated with the National Biodiversity Data Centre, and they're just really interesting opportunities for students to engage with. So Birdwatch Ireland, of course, also have the Garden Bird Survey that would have started earlier on in the winter. So, but you can still find out about it now and maybe have it in your plan for next autumn, winter. And so there's links there to find out more about all of those different opportunities. And the last one there is if you're close to a coastal area, Explore Your Shore might be of interest to you. Just to reiterate, out of what we've covered today, there's an awful lot of ideas there and different things that you can be getting on with at winter time. But by all means, we would not expect that a school would take on all of those different elements or implement all those different landscape features in that. So just pick and choose what really suits your school, suits your capacity, your community and your school grounds in particular, and come up with a plan that makes sense regarding all of that. And again, the other overarching notion really is that providing wild spaces is the best thing we can do for biodiversity. So if at all possible, veer towards planting trees, hedges, letting areas grow a bit wilder. And the All Ireland Pollinator Plan is a fantastic place to go to find resources on pollinators and what pollinators need. It's at www.pollinators.ie, but they also provide free signage that you can download and laminate yourself to, say, mark a corner of your grounds as being saved for the bees or letting to grow wild. And it's just, I suppose it can be important to be able to put up that kind of signage to let other people know that you haven't just forgotten about this corner or that corner of your school grounds, that it's actually been intentionally managed in such a way to promote biodiversity. So as I say, that signage is readily available for free from those sites. Okay, thanks a million. Lovely to have you all on board today, and we hope to see you at our next event. Bye-bye.